He's sleeping with the barrels now, a pig in a sty.
Nothing but a sot, hiding with his casks. He thinks the drink will keep him warm.
Below them, heavy cellar doors groaned open. Patrick descended the frost-crusted steps, his dog Rusty padding behind, into a glow that had no right to be there. Inside, no fire burned, no stove, just rows of wooden vats, bubbling softly, throwing heat into the stone room like a living thing.
Steady, Rusty. Let them talk. The apples know better.
Rusty curled at the base of a great cask, content in the unseen warmth. The airlocks chugged steadily, froth climbing the glass. Every bubble a tiny furnace. He laid a palm against the wood. It answered with a low, steady heat, not fire, but something deeper. Steam rose from an open vat, weaving through the amber light like breath in a church. Outside, they called it a drunkard's den. Inside, Patrick smiled and checked his batch. The cellar didn't need a fire. It had apples. The next morning, Patrick worked through his vats with a mallet and a practiced ear. He tasted from a barrel, a thimble's worth, no more.
He'll have a sore head before night. Poking at those barrels won't fill his belly.
Inside the glass jar, yeast feasted on sugar, throwing off heat as it worked. A quiet alchemy. Patrick could feel it radiating through the oak, a steady, living warmth.
Let them laugh. The cold will teach them soon enough.
Rusty dozed, unbothered by the village noise above. A bitter wind rattled the small window, but inside, the candle flame never flickered. The flame burned steady, proof that the air was still, the cold held at bay.
A's warm from the drink, but wait till the real cold comes. He'll be begging for a blanket.
The cellar held its heat, and Patrick held his peace. The first real snow came at dusk, piling against doors and plastering the windows with white silence. By midnight, the village cabins were iceboxes. Families huddled under every blanket they owned, breath fogging in the dark. Ilara stuffed rags under the door crack, but the cold seeped through the walls like a slow, invisible river. Marcus fed his last dry split into the stove and watched the flames thin and die before the embers caught. Below ground, Patrick worked in a single shirt, the cellar so warm that candle wax softened on the barrel heads. A child tugged at Ilara's shawl and asked why no smoke ever rose from the drunkard's chimney.
It's the drink warming him. Don't you go near that place.
Patrick laid his palm flat against a cask and felt the fermentation humming through the oak like a heartbeat. A thermometer on the wall held steady at 52 degrees. Outside, the village was dropping into the low teens. Marcus passed the cellar door and gripped the iron handle. It was warm. He pulled his hand back, frowning, and hurried on. Old Ben had seen too many winters to trust easy warmth. He walked to the cellar not to mock, but to understand. He rapped the heavy timber door. Patrick opened it in his shirt sleeves, heat spilling out like a confession.
No fire anywhere, and it's warmer than my house. What have you got down here?
Cider, Ben. Just cider. Come in and feel for yourself.
Ben laid his wrinkled hand against an oak cask. The heat pushed back, steady and dry, not the fleeting flush of whiskey.
This isn't drink. This is something else.
Taste it. Just apples doing what apples do.
The cider was cool and sweet, not the hot burn Ben expected.
I don't understand it, but I won't forget it.
Ben climbed the steps into the biting wind, pulling the door shut behind him. He told no one what he had felt. At dawn, the water bucket outside Ilara's cabin was a block of solid ice. The village began to fear the cold.
This cold is a death sentence. The baby's fingers are blue.
Through the small cellar window, snow fell thick and fast. The sky had turned the color of old iron, Patrick red by candlelight, his back to the storm. The cellar smelled of yeast and damp oak. The candle flame stood straight as a soldier, No draft, no chill, just the steady warmth of fermenting fruit. Patrick cracked the door and looked out. The mountains had vanished behind a white wall. He made his bed beside the largest vat, where the oak radiated heat like a sleeping animal.
That drunkard in his den! I'll break his door down if he's got heat and we don't.
The cellar door was caked with frost, but inside, the amber glow never wavered.
They'll never understand. The apples give what fire never could.
By midday, the storm grabbed the valley by the throat. The sky turned black, the wind a distant thunder.
We'll freeze if we don't get more wood.
Patrick hauled in the last sack of apples. He had food for weeks and cider for warmth. The blizzard struck like a fist. Cabins shook, and the world disappeared in white. Inside, the cellar breathed easy. The vats hummed, and Rusty slept, tail twitching.
The fire's dead. The baby won't stop crying. We've nothing left to burn.
The cellar heat held steady. Patrick listened to the storm and knew the village was suffering. Above ground, families fed their last chairs to the stove, and still the cold won.
That drunkard's cellar is the only warm place in the valley. It's not right.
Patrick gazed through the frost-rimed glass. Soon, they would have no choice but to knock. 2 days of blizzard took the valley apart. Cabin walls wept ice, and men burned their own bedposts.
Not a splinter left. That drunkard's sitting pretty while we freeze like rats.
Ilara nailed old planks across a shattered window, her breath clouding the pane. The glass was no match for the wind. 40 feet below, Patrick checked his vats. The airlocks chugged, the stone walls dry and warm. In the village, whispers turned ugly. No smoke, no fire. How was he still alive?
Either he's dead down there, or he's made a pact with the devil.
The fermentation never paused. Yeast fed and multiplied, giving off a clean, constant heat.
They'll knock soon. Desperation always knocks.
Through the small window, snow plastered the glass. Inside, the cellar thermometer hadn't budged. The cellar door stayed shut. Outside, they called it witchcraft. Inside, just apples. On the third night, old Ben pushed through the drifts. He had to see if a hidden fire kept Patrick warm. He pounded the heavy door. When it swung open, the wall of heat nearly drove him to his knees.
I've searched every house in the valley. None feels like this. Where's the flame?
There is no flame, Ben. The apples are the heat.
It's not drink. I know warm, and this isn't it.
Ben laid his hand on the cask. The wood pulsed with a steady, silent warmth.
Yeast turns sugar to cider and throws off heat. 40 gallons can raise the room 20 degrees.
A glass jar on the shelf bubbled with thick foam, the yeast working.
I believe you. But the others see witchcraft. They'll come for you soon.
Ben pulled the door shut and staggered home. He would not speak of it, but the storm was far from over. In his frozen cabin, old Ben sat staring at the frost on the window. A memory from his youth gnawed at him. A hay barn had once burned. In the village common room, men blew on their hands and stamped their feet to keep warm. The cold was a living thing.
We go to the cellar. That drunkard's got the only warm hole in the ground.
Probably dead by now. Serves him right for laughing.
Nobody's seen smoke. Not one whiff of a fire. He's got to be brewing something.
But a man near the window saw a light, a sliver of gold under the door. The villagers noted the glow. A few men gathered, looking out at the distant cellar.
Keep my own counsel, but the town is freezing.
The storm was far from over. The town's desperation had curdled into a plan.
He's alive. The fool keeps warm.
Elara's youngest stopped shivering and went limp. Panic broke her pride. She plunged into the white fury. The child clutched to her chest and beat on the cellar door until her knuckles split. Patrick opened it without a word. The blast of warm air spilled over them, and Elara stumbled inside.
My baby. I thought I'd lost her to the cold.
He laid the child beside the warmest cask. Within moments, the little fingers pinkened, and the shallow breathing deepened.
But there's no fire. How is it so warm?
Here. It's not just for drinking. The apples give off heat when they work.
Rusty dozed at her feet. The cellar felt like a womb. Elara wept.
We called you a drunkard. We were blind.
Patrick just nodded. The apples knew the truth. Now you do. The first crack in the town's mockery had opened. Outside, the storm howled on, but inside, Elara held her child and wept with gratitude. By morning, the village realized Elara was missing. Marcus gathered men and followed her fading tracks to the cellar.
Open up, Patrick! We know you have her down there!
The heavy door swung open. Patrick stood in shirt sleeves, Elara behind him, the warm air misting into the cold.
Don't hurt him, Marcus. He saved my child from the frost.
Marcus pushed inside, hunting for a fire. He found none, just rows of bubbling cider.
I know what this is. I once saw a barn heat from fermenting hay. This is the same.
Marcus laid his hand on the oak. The heat was steady, like a living thing.
No fire at all. But how does it stay so warm?
Yeast turns sugar to cider, and the work gives off heat. 40 gallons raise the room 20 degrees.
The crowd fell silent, then murmured in astonishment. The drunkard's den, they realized, was never a den at all. Marcus grabbed a lantern and stalked the cellar's edge, hunched behind barrels, squinting into corners for any trace of hidden fire.
It has to be here somewhere. Nobody keeps a room this warm without a fire.
He checked behind the last cask, lifted barrel lids, and found only the steady churn of fermenting cider.
Nothing. Not a single ember. It really is the apples.
A bitter gust rattled the door. The cold was inching into the room, and the shivering crowd pressed closer.
Please, Patrick. The storm's not over. Let us stay.
Patrick hesitated, his hand on the latch. He looked at the faces, the same ones that had mocked him. Then he opened the door wide.
Come in, all of you. There's enough heat for everyone, more than fire ever gave.
The cellar filled with cold bodies and steaming wet wool, grateful whispers echoing off the stone. Patrick crossed his arms and watched. The drunkard's den had become a haven. Patrick moved among the huddled families, pressing thick slices of dried apple and small cups of cider into numbed hands.
We thought you were just a drunk, hiding with your barrels. We were fools.
I was preparing for winter. The apples don't care what you call me.
The words hung in the warm air. Some faces flushed with shame, and the silence grew thicker than the cold outside.
The lad found a way to turn a barn heat into a home. A blind man could see it now.
But no fire. I still don't get it.
It's the yeast. Every bubble puts heat into the room. 60 gallons working right now.
Rusty wove through the crowd, tail wagging, breaking the last of the cold silence. More hands reached for the cider. The cellar began to warm, not just from the vats, but from cautious smiles. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, the first tentative bridge had been laid. Patrick walked the rows, laying his palm on a different vat. Each lid told a calendar, some young and wild, others slow and sleepy.
So some are fresh, some nearly finished. You've got a chain of heat.
As one finishes, another starts. The cellar never cools.
Marcus stared at the vats, then the thermometer, and shook his head with a low grunt.
You planned this from the start. Played the fool while you built a whole stove out of apples.
I let them mock me. The apples don't need an audience.
The crowd stirred, admiration mixing with old resentment. A A few whispered that he'd let them freeze to prove a point. The night pressed in, and the cellar grew loud with too many bodies and too little trust.
Patience. The storm will pass.
But the blizzard had not finished with the valley, and not all men were ready to forgive. A low muttering rose from a corner of the cellar, the kind that curdles into a challenge when men are too long in the dark. A man's voice cut through the warmth. The town fool still can't pour a drink without spilling it.
I poured you warmth when you had none. That makes me a fool.
Shut your mouth. He saved my baby while you slept frozen.
I would have broken down his door, but he opened it. That alone is more than you've done.
The man faltered, seeing the crowd's hard stares. Even Marcus, the loudest scoffer, had turned. The man muttered, I meant nothing by it. Just old habits.
Old habits die hard. Tonight, we share heat. Tomorrow, you'll remember who gave it.
Rusty nudged the man's leg, and a few nervous laughs broke the tension. The cellar settled back to murmurs, but the power had shifted. No one would call him a drunkard again. The wind shifted. A single iron-hard gust hammered the cellar door, rattling the hinges and snapping the heavy timber like a drum. A needle of icy air sliced through the seam beneath the door. The candle flames leaned and guttered, and the room felt the storm's teeth.
That's moving air. It'll steal the heat faster than the vats can make it. Plug every crack you can reach.
The room scrambled. Men shoved torn strips of wool into the gap beneath the door. Women packed rags into the chinks around the window frame.
Still air stays warm. The vats can hold the room if we keep the wind from moving through.
Marcus drove a length of old burlap into a split in the door frame, his fingers red with cold. Elara pressed her shawl against the draft above the threshold. Patrick ran his palm along the door edge, feeling for the last thin current of cold. Nothing. The seams were tight. The candle flames straightened. The air settled into the thick warmth of fermenting fruit. The cellar had become a fortress.
You learned this from the mountains, not just a barrel.
The cellar held firm. Outside the storm screamed, but inside, a dozen hands had built a pocket of still air. Patrick pulled aside a canvas and revealed sacks of dried apples, jars of preserved fruit, and enough flour to last weeks.
You knew the storm would come. You planned this from the first frost.
I watched the signs. A hard summer means a hard winter. The apples were ready. So was I.
He showed them his record book, pages of temperatures and fermentation charts, penciled in neat rows.
40 gallons of cider in active ferment raises the room 20 degrees. I've got 60 gallons going.
The crowd listened. No more whispers. Just the soft chug of airlocks and the scratch of a turning page.
You turned a drinking den into a furnace. The town owes you more than an apology.
Patrick poured cider for those who had none. The cellar filled with quiet gratitude.
I'll not forget this. Neither will any of us.
The storm still raged, but the cellar had become a schoolroom. And Patrick, its teacher. The storm broke at dawn, leaving the valley buried under a silent white shroud. Patrick heaved the cellar door open. Warm amber light spilled across the frozen steps. The first color the world had seen in days. Villagers crept out behind him, blinking at the pale sun. Their cabins were half crushed by drifts, but they were alive.
We owe you, every one of us.
Remember the apples. They did the work, not me.
One by one, the townsfolk offered their hands. Gratitude no longer whispered but spoken plainly.
We'll bring our children to learn. No one will call you a drunkard again.
The valley won't forget. You'll have your due.
The cellar remained warm, even with the door open. The vats still humming their quiet, tireless work, and the word drunkard died that morning, buried under the same snow that had nearly killed them. The cellar door stood open, a golden wound in the white. Women carried warm cider to the injured. Men rebuilt walls with thawing hands.
You've given us more than warmth, Patrick. You've given us the truth.
The room that had been a joke became the valley's heart. No one called it a den anymore. The heat from his fermenting cider vats warmed the cellar. They'd mocked the drunkard's den, but now they knew. And the man they'd written off as a sot had stumbled onto free warmth bubbling in his own cellar.
You don't need to thank me. The apples did the work. I just paid attention.
We spat on your name, but you saved our children. We won't forget.
The drunkard's den was dead. In its place stood the warmest, best-stocked room the valley had ever known, and the mockers came knocking no more. They knew where home was. The heat from his vats did more than warm a cellar. It turned a town's scorn into gratitude. By the time the crocuses broke through the snow, a dozen homes had small carboys bubbling in their kitchens.
Keep the airlock clean. If it stops bubbling, wrap it in a blanket and give it time.
His cellar had become a schoolroom, and Patrick taught with the patience of a man who had nothing left to prove.
Never thought I'd see the day. The whole valley ran on apple heat.
The apples did it. I just paid attention.
The cellar was quieter now, but never cold. The steady churn of fermentation had become the valley's heartbeat.
Funny thing, Ben. They called me a drunkard for sleeping with the casks. Turns out the casks kept me sober and alive.
The best kind of twist. Now, pour me another.
Rusty yawned at Patrick's feet, the cellar warm and timeless. The mockery had become a memory, fading like frost on a spring pane. Patrick knew another winter would come, but he would be ready. One evening, the cellar filled not with refugees, but with neighbors. A pot of stew bubbled beside the vats. A small girl tugged at his sleeve. "Mr. Patrick, can Rusty have a bite?"
He's already had 3. But go on. Give him another.
A few months ago, they'd crossed the street to avoid you. Now you can't keep the children away.
Funny how a blizzard flips a man's name.
The mockery had died with the winter. What remained was a room that smelled of apples and trust.
I'll tell my grandchildren about the winter we almost froze, and the man who saved us.
I was the loudest fool. I'll make sure no one forgets what you did.
Patrick only raised his mug. The heat from his vats had done more than warm a cellar. It had given a town back its heart. Outside, the snow had begun to melt, but the golden light from the cellar door spilled across the ground like a promise kept. When autumn bent the boughs, the village came to pick. Not to mock, but to gather. The cellar filled again with the scent of ripe fruit. He stacked the last of the wood, checked the airlocks, and felt the familiar warmth rising from the new batch. Patrick stood in the amber light, a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. The valley was ready. At his feet, Rusty dozed, the cellar's heartbeat steady as ever. A small wooden sign, Reeves Cider, creaked in the wind, its paint freshly touched by frost. He looked out across the white valley, the same that had once mocked him. The heat from his vats did more than warm a cellar. It uncovered a truth buried under scorn, that wisdom often hides in the places the world calls foolish.
Let winter do its worst. The apples will answer.
Outside, frost crept up the stone steps, but inside, the golden light held steady, and the man they wrote off as a sot had turned free warmth into a legacy of the valley.